Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Philip Crampton, President of the CIF, and on behalf of the Construction Industry Federation, I am delighted to welcome you here this morning for this briefing about project bank accounts. Project bank accounts have been increasingly discussed amongst the construction industry in this country over recent years. There's been widespread discourse about how this mechanism could be utilised by our industry and how it might impact on main contractors, subcontractors and specialist contractors. Project bank accounts have been implemented in Britain for approximately 6 years at this point, and this provides an interesting case study on how the system is working for the construction industry in our near neighbours. With Irish construction companies securing an increasing level of work in the UK over recent years, many members of the CIF have been able to witness the use of project bank account system firsthand. This has further encouraged the debate on the use of project bank accounts in the Republic, as has the most recent introduction in Northern Ireland. At the beginning of this year, project bank accounts were brought in for public sector contracts worth more than £1 million sterling by the Northern Assembly. It would be fair to say that these various elements have contributed to the issue of project bank accounts becoming a regular subject of discussion to construction companies of all hues throughout this country. However, perhaps the biggest factor in project bank accounts becoming a more regular topic has been the various payment disputes which have hit our industry in recent years. Understandably, people are looking for systems and processes to be put in place that will ensure that they are paid on time for the work that they've done. They look at the situation in the UK and see project bank accounts as being a potential solution. These various factors have led to project bank accounts receiving political and departmental attention. They have been suggested as a solution by various members of the opposition as a way of helping our industry. They have also received government attention. During the summer, when the Construction Contracts Bill was making its way through the Oireachtas, Minister Brian Hayes referred specifically to project bank accounts, and he said that the government is examining this proposal and even suggested that they could be brought in relatively soon. We also understand that the Government Construction Contracts Committee intends to carry out a pilot project bank account on a project in the future. So clearly the issue is very much on the government agenda. Bearing all these considerations, the CIF wanted to organise this briefing today to inform our members about the issue. We wanted to help provide a better understanding of how project bank accounts might impact our industry. I'm sure here today that everybody understands that under a project bank account, the main contractor and the subcontractors are all specifically referenced and then paid out of a designated project account. That way, the various contractors know where they stand in terms of the drawdown of funds from clients for a specific project. However, not everyone will be as clear as to how project bank accounts operate on a practical basis. They won't be aware of the various perspective that exists or some of the more detailed implications. They may not have full facts on how the project bank accounts differ from the current payment process. For that reason, we have organised this briefing and invited some high-calibre speakers to provide their perspectives. First up, we have Steve Rosell, who, as the former head of procurement of the UK Highways Agency, has a very solid and deep, in-depth knowledge of how project bank accounts have operated in Britain. Edward Quigg from Quigg Golden will discuss the legal implications of project bank accounts and the experiences to date. With Quigg Golden operating throughout the Republic, the North and Britain, they have detailed knowledge of the legal ramifications of project bank accounts. Gillian Murtagh of Shea Murtagh will then provide a perspective on how project bank accounts from the specialist contractor's point of view, and she'll be followed by Pat Lucy of CISC, who will look at things from a main contractor's perspective. We'll then have a discussion chaired by CIF Director General Tom Parlin before the briefing concludes. We hope this briefing will act as another benefit to everyone present, and that everyone in attendance today will have a stronger idea about project bank accounts and how they might be implemented in this country. Thank you very much for your attention and enjoy the briefing.
Thanks, Philip. Well, without any further ado then, I'll introduce Steve. And Steve is not really a stranger to us anymore in that he's been with us a number of times briefing us on some issues. And certainly Steve, he's walked the walk with regard to his experience in procurement. He's been head of procurement for Crossrail. I think it was a 15.9 billion whether it's not over yet anyhow. But Steve is a consultant now, and we appreciate him coming here. And Steve is going to give us his perspective on this.
Thank you very much, and good morning. Must be a bit of a challenge to get people out to a breakfast seminar on a riveting topic like project bank accounts, so you've done well to come along today. It is actually something that is very important development within the United Kingdom in terms of promoting better procurement practice, better relationships with the supply chain, and getting better value for money. So I'm very pleased to be able to come and share a few of the lessons learnt in terms of how it's been developed in the United Kingdom. And to refer to Crossrail, yes, I'm still working at Crossrail. I had the pleasure of being head of procurement there for a couple of years when actually project bank accounts were introduced at Crossrail, and I use that as an example within my presentation this morning. We refer to 15.9 billion. Quite often on public sector projects you would normally say 15.9 billion and rising, but on Crossrail, because of the work that was put in to look at the cost estimates, we hope it's 15.9 billion pound and reducing, but we're not finished yet, so I have to touch wood on that. Okay, what I want to do is just set out the background to the Fair Payment Initiative in the United Kingdom, look at how the government sought to set up project bank accounts, how that was viewed within the industry. There were some earlier examples of project bank accounts before the 6-year period referred to by Philip. Look at Crossrail and just summarise some of those issues. So the UK Fair Payment Initiative, this was something that was taken forward between about 2004-2007. There were a lot of issues, as you've already heard, as you're very familiar with, poor payment practices and the problems that were occurring. And so the Office of Government Commerce, the OGC, that was set up to oversee public sector procurement in the UK, decided to look at how fair payment generally might get taken forward, and ultimately it led to the production of this guide to best practice in fair payment, which was published in 2007. And you can always tell in the UK how important an issue is by the quality of the glossy brochure, and this is actually a very high quality one, so I think that's a good indication, particularly stuff that comes out of government. And that sets out in particular the case for change, and it refers to the many problems that were occurring, the commercial pressures caused by late payment, the problems of suppliers potentially going bust because of cash flow problems, and it refers to the potential savings that clients can get through some of these fair payment initiatives, looking at potentially 2.5% savings on construction costs. And ultimately, at that stage, they set it not a target, but they had an aspiration of achieving over £750 million savings through better payment processes, and that would increase as confidence in the system grew. So it was seen as a very important aspect to maintain the supply chain, to maintain relationships, and to deliver better value for money. So the report highlighted those poor payment practices. And again, that built on the Construction Act that was in place in 1996, and I believe you have one going through, which hopefully will be a good thing for the industry. And it was all about payment certainty, building up trust, underpinning collaboration, which, as those of you who've been involved in the procurement sessions we've had, very much a collaborative approach to procurement is what the government is trying to install across the whole of the UK construction sector. That takes some time, there's still some way to go on that, but good progress has been made in some areas. It's very much about improving certainty of payment, minimising fair financing charges, and reducing the risks of key parts of the supply chain not being available because of cash flow problems. So this document also set out project bank accounts as part of the overall Fair Payment Initiative. And the OGC objectives, the Office of Government Commerce objectives, were quite simple, ensuring that the lead contractor and supply chain receive that prompt payment, looking to get all the supply chain paid within 30 days, allowing the supply chain to receive payment from a single central account rather than through the main contractor, encouraging the greater transparency of cost and cost practices, because again that's part of the government's desire to understand its costs better, to be able to benchmark costs, to see where there is unnecessary cost, and to get better value for money by all parties working together to understand those costs better. And I mean, there are other measures that need to be taken to achieve that transparency, but project bank accounts do help. And overall, they had a desire to put an end to poor payment practice. Now, still some way to go to achieve that, but clearly the rollout of project bank accounts is helping towards that objective. So under the OGC approach, and again this is fairly simple stuff, but it's useful to understand the fundamentals. So under the OGC approach, it's the client who's setting up a deposit account. I mean, some of the contracts that are out there where provision is made for project bank account, it's the contractor who sets it up. It doesn't really matter who sets it up, provided there is agreement on how that's working. The client makes those contract payments directly into the project bank account. The contractor is providing a breakdown of main supply chain payments with its valuation. And on Crossrail, we'll come on to that, but as well as a breakdown of the main supply chain payments, the client looks forward 4 weeks and makes the valuation on that basis. So by the end of the 4 weeks, that is work that is undertaken. So the client's not paying in advance, but it's paying on the basis of forecasts, which can then be reconciled in the next account if necessary. The client and contractor will provide authorised signatories to release funds directly to the supply chain from the project bank account. And again, that's how the OGC set it up. There are contracts, including Crossrail, where it is the contractor who is authorising the release of funds direct, subject to an appropriate process. It's all governed by a trust deed to protect supply chain payments in the case of main contractor insolvency, so that if the main contractor were to go insolvent, then the way the project bank account is set up, the monies in the account are held in trust for the supply chain. And again, there are standard forms of contract. We're using the NEC 3, the engineering construction contract, which in the latest version makes provision for bank accounts and provides a standard deed of trust to use. And again, you find that clients will take that. They'll probably change it slightly for their particular purposes, but that provides a good basis to get the process working. So yes, there are standard procedures. There's a standard approach that the government is setting out. But what you tend to find in practice is that the detailed procedures used on bank accounts across the UK do vary a bit by client. And for example, I mean, one example is where Crossrail will include suppliers who are in direct contract with the main contractor. They're the people who are included in the project bank account provisions. The Highways Agency, who are now using project bank accounts in the UK, they include Tier 2 and Tier 3 within the nominated suppliers who benefit from the project bank account. In order to get those fair principle endorsed and included within the various guidance, there were working groups set up in order to get everybody brought into it, and there was a lot of discussion. I think Rudy, who's with us today, I think Rudy was also involved in the working group that took forward the Fair Payment Initiative and moved us towards project bank accounts. So it was the Office of Government Commerce again who set up an industry-wide group. I was a member of that during about 2005 to 2007. And again, there was a lot of concern at the time, particularly from main contractors, about the implications for their financing arrangements. The Public Sector Construction Clients Forum was involved, Specialist Engineering Contractor Group, and the National Audit Office was also involved in looking at the procedures. And eventually the proposals that were incorporated into the Fair Payment Initiative and the proposals for project bank accounts were signed up to by all of those industry representatives. So it had a good basis on which clients could say, well, look, the industry has been involved in this, you know, their comments have been taken on board, and we were in a strong position, you know, as clients to take that forward into some very major projects. The public bodies who are now supporting project bank accounts in the UK include Crossrail, Defence Estates, Highways Agency and the Ministry of Justice, and there are others who are also looking at it, and others in other parts of the United Kingdom who are also now taking it forward. So it's starting to become quite well embedded. There was actually an earlier experience of project bank accounts. That was the Channel Tunnel Rail Link, built between 1998 and 2007. They were using the NEC2 option C contracts, the target price contracts, and the bank accounts were used on all 15 of those. The bank accounts were not actually set up as trusts, so there was still a concern that what would happen if a major contractor went bust, what would happen to the money in that account. Fortunately that didn't occur. Payments were paid into the account based on actual and forecasts, and on Channel Tunnel Rail Link they looked a 7-week look ahead, which in subsequent payments was adjusted to reflect the actual payments during that period. It was all geared towards ensuring that the contractor had neutral cash flow so that their position was protected. All payments of actual costs were made from the project bank account. We sometimes see some examples on projects where there is a project bank account, but payments are also made from other accounts, which is not a practice that I think is to be encouraged. The contractor can draw down on the project bank account without client authorisation at any time, or obviously with controls in the form of audits and transparency through the subsequent accounts that were submitted. And there was an estimated, it's difficult to find actual evidence of savings, but the savings that were estimated in the Channel Tunnel Rail Link were of the order of 3%. And it's one of those things that even on the current contracts, it's very difficult to provide actual details of savings. It's more a judgment than actual evidence. Just to briefly give you some information from the current project, Crossrail, where it's working well from the client's point of view. Crossrail is the 15.9 billion. It's a new railway across London, going from Maidenhead in the west across to Sheffield, and the central section shown in red on there is being built in tunnel with 8 new stations in that area. So it's a major programme of work, and probably in excess of 100 contracts to undertake the advanced works and the main works. So a big programme of work, big programme of contracts. A lot of tunnelling. I know that we've got Pat here who is going to give us a bit more detail on the project, but I always take the opportunity to show a picture of one of these very expensive tunnel boring machines we've purchased. So the tunnelling going at up to 40 metres beneath London. Nothing fallen over yet on the ground, is it, Pat? Thank you. Good. One or two starting to show signs of something, but hopefully not. But again, some very large underground structures being built. Again, it's just to show the scale of some of the work that's going on. It's one of the caverns where the railway forks to go in different directions at Stepney. And in terms of the progress, the civils and tunnelling work, the civils in the form of a lot of enabling works is well advanced. The tunnelling is over 50% complete. Stations are now underway. System contracts are procured, and the design of those systems is underway. The trains are about to be announced. So it's made good progress towards the opening in 2018. So it's a big project, a massive programme on which to take forward project bank accounts, and as a client, Crossrail had enough confidence from the government support for project bank accounts from the previous work on Channel Tunnel Rail Link. It had enough confidence to say, yes, we're going to use project bank accounts across the whole programme. And again, it was part of a Crossrail fair payment initiative. So it's not just the project bank accounts that are being used to support the supply chain in terms of fair payment. There is a fair payment charter which all contractors are required to sign, not legally binding, but we require the main contractors to roll down the fair payment and proposals throughout the supply chain to achieve the target of 30-day payment throughout the supply chain. Very much part of integrated working with the whole supply chain. And those provisions are included in all main work contracts. The project bank accounts themselves, Crossrail's operating under the NEC option C in the main. So again, the target price, updated from the Channel Tunnel Rail Link because we're using the NEC 3, which is very much the same principles as the NEC 2. So it is dependent on an open book contractual approach with the client having the facility to audit books and to have full transparency of cost. The approach we're adopting or have adopted is based on that Channel Tunnel Rail Link. The payments into the bank account are based on the defined costs as set out in the contract, but with a 4-week look ahead, so that when the payment is made, you're looking ahead to the 4 weeks over the coming period, again to support the contractors, giving them a neutral cash flow position. Again, we're using the trust deed to support the supply chain, so that in the event of main contractor insolvency, the supply chain payments are protected, and legal views have been taken on the robustness of that. And we're satisfied that's the case, and we believe the supply chain are happy with that as well. As I say, Crossrail took the decision to just to cover second-tier subcontractors. We were pushing initially for greater involvement down the different tiers of the supply chain, but at that time the finance director took some convincing that this was the way to move forward, and so that was the compromise that had to be made. So we paid to the second tier, but then through the Fair Payment Initiative, we monitor the payments down further into the supply chain. Not all contracts have been covered on Crossrail. There are quite a number of smaller framework contracts, and the frameworks were actually set up at an earlier stage before that final decision had been taken for project bank accounts. And those smaller projects are the values up to about 20 million, and so they're not covered. There's one or two that are covered, but in the main they're not covered. What I would say is that the cost of setting up the bank accounts is actually very small. Crossrail is using HSBC as its banker. We went to a procurement competition in order to appoint the bank that would provide the bank facilities. I think RBS and Barclays were also providing the service at that time. But the sorts of monies, it's just a few pounds per month in terms of running the account, and the charges are pretty small. The main effort is in putting in place the process to ensure that the proper, all the people understand their roles and what the process is for signing out the payments. So the cost is in setting up the process, in training the people and ensuring that they're understanding the roles. The actual banking facility costs are absolutely minimal. The way Crossrail has set it up, the interest remains with Crossrail Limited. But again, I mean, it's small sums of money in terms of how money is paid into the account, and then the bank will put it into a deposit account until the money is, and that's all done automatically by the bank. So there is some interest, but and that helps to offset the fairly minimal costs. And then those bank fees, if the contractor has any bank costs, and they are recoverable under the contract, provided they're not interest payable because he's not managed the account properly, in which case they become sort of disallowable costs. So the overall, some of the facts, we've got over 25 main works contracts using the PPAs. Those values are actually between about 600 million. But those are just approximate values. The payments to date through the project bank accounts are in excess of £1 billion. The total expected accounts on Crossrail will be in excess of 5 billion. And it's HSBC, as I said, who have been providing that facility. I think there are others in the market who are now keen to, because there's obviously a growing market, there are others now who are coming in. So in terms of where I think we're at, the bank accounts, they can be applied to contracts of a wide range of value. Probably more benefit on the higher value contracts because the risk of payments going wrong or bad practices being followed are much higher where you've got key suppliers on a big program of work and you're trying to manage the risk of suppliers not failing. There's flexibility on suppliers that are covered by the project bank account arrangements, whether it's second tier, second, third and fourth or whatever, and different clients are taking different approaches to that. The costs of setting up are minimal and offset by interests. And what we have found is that it very much supports collaboration and is helping to reducing risk, and that's been a major factor in Crossrail remaining on programme with the supply chain, fully committed to delivering to that programme. And with that, Chairman, I shall say thank you and hand on.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, Steve. And certainly, I think you've outlined the situation very clearly. So we'll move on very quickly, and our next speaker is Edward. We're a bit concerned, Edward, that's so.
Oh, don't worry. I was just keeping you your tools.
Edward is from very well known Big Golden consultants and law firm, and their I suppose job here has been construction dispute resolution, and there's probably been very rich pickings in the recent times in terms of the adversarial nature of the contracts that we have, and so I'm conscious that David O'Brien is down here with us as well today. We're glad to have you, David. And progress hopefully has been made, and we have intense activity in that direction. Plus, I know that you have quite a bit of experience from your UK, Northern Ireland experience, Edward. So we're delighted that you're here, and we look forward to your.
John, I wouldn't call them rich pickings, by the way. It's good value pickings. Well, look, I suppose what I should say from the outset is the sort of the quick golden view, if you like, in relation to project bank accounts, or at least my view on it, is be careful. They're not the world's best thing. They're not going to cure all ills. And I know that I disagree with some people, particularly the likes of Rudy at the back, in relation to them. If you are talking about a £15.9 billion project, absolutely. Let's get stuck in and let's look at the advantages of them. If we're looking at a £5 million scheme down the road, let's be careful. Let's really look at the cost-benefit analysis of this and decide, is there really such a benefit to having such a scheme in place? So if you're dealing with high-value contracts where you have very detailed levels of subcontract supply chain that we need to get the money through to them and get it through on time and get it through efficiently, then yes, project bank accounts have a very strong role to play. I am quite sceptical that they deliver such benefits in smaller value contracts personally, but I've got to say that sort of from the outset so you know where I'm coming from. But perhaps that's good that we have a balance in Well, Steve has actually described very well what they are, so I don't really need to go through a lot of this. They're ring-fenced bank accounts set up for the sole purpose to act as a procurement channel. Now, one thing I will say, and I'll come back to this in a minute, they do not set out payment rules. They do not deal with how payment is to be sorted out in the contract or between the supply chain members. It is purely a finance tool available for the distribution of the money. It does not set the rules out as to how that money is to be dealt with and how is it to be paid out, when is it to be paid out, and what will happen with disputes. That has to be dealt with in your contract. So don't think, oh, the project bank account, that somehow will supplant our contract provisions in some way. They don't. You have to have amended contract to suit this new purpose. What it will do is help to ensure payment on the contract date. So this is really one of the main advantages, obviously, in that instead of the money coming from the employer several weeks late, probably, or at least several weeks after the work has been done, to the main contractor, and then the main contractor sitting on it for a few weeks until he gives it to his subcontractors, who sits on it for a few weeks until he gives it to the subcontractors, and by the time it gets right down to the bottom of the supply chain, it's so long after the event. There's a real issue there. And project bank accounts can, and do, to some extent, remedy that problem. But they remedy it only to a point. If you think of the structure I'm describing, where you have employer, main contractor, and then T2 subcontractors, T3, and so on. Well, what Steve was saying with what they've done in Crossrail, the main contractor is in the project bank account, but the main contractor was always paid directly from the employer anyway. So we're only shortening the period of payment, but that can be dealt with in the contract without a project bank account. So it doesn't really help the contractor much, I argue. T2 subcontractors, yes, of course it helps them, because it stops the main contractor sitting on the money for a period of time. So we cut that period out. But the other subcontractors, they're not getting the benefit out of this, really. So all we're doing is shortening the eventual payment duration for these lower level subcontractors by the period it took the main contractor to pay the main subcontractor. So we're taking that out. But everything else is left in there. Now what Crossrail did, and what many people are doing, is working on this forecast basis. And I'm not 100% sure that many employers in Ireland are content with the concept of calculating a forecast of what work is going to be done over the next month and then paying that money into an account so that it's there for the end of the month. But if they are content to do that, well, we can do that. We can shorten the period that the employer has to pay in a contract as much as we like. We don't need necessarily to set up a project bank account to do that. So it doesn't actually remedy that ill, in my opinion. It does, but there's another way of doing it, a more simple way, I suggest to you. Well, why do we have them? Well, Steve set out a really good history session there, so I'm not going to go through that again. I don't think I need to repeat the stuff. But there is an issue of unfair payment practices within the construction industry, and many subcontractors will tell you just how bad it is in terms of trying to get payment from the main contractor. The changes in the construction industry just identify the fact that now a main contractor doesn't actually do anything. It is unusual for a main contractor to do something. In fact, I'm involved in the process at the minute of doing due diligence on a contractor. And the most amazing thing I came across was the fact that 40% of the work is done by himself. He actually employs joiners and labourers and general operatives, and he actually does stuff. And I was amazed, because when's the last time a main contractor actually did anything? He just subcontracts everything out. But he does do something, he sets them up. So how does it work?
Just after losing the fact.
Don't worry. Listen, there's three things we need in terms of a project bank account here. We need the trust deed. And yes, if you look in the NEC, they have a standard form of trust deed. But we need a trust deed. That's one document we need. The second thing we need to do is amend the contract provisions in the payment clause. Again, we can't just set up a project bank account with a standard form contract without making amendments to it as to how the payments are going to be dealt with. They need to be amended. So those are two things you need. And the third thing we need is to set up the account. And that's relatively straightforward, and Barclays or HSBC or any of the other banks would be quite happy to do that. And there is really not much cost to it, to running the account. You know, in terms of, if you go for the likes of Barclays, is what I know, they will talk to you about, oh yes, it's, you know, 40p for a backs transfer and 25 cents for this or for writing a cheque. It is minimal. It really just doesn't come into the scheme of things. But the real cost in terms of the project bank account is the administration in setting it up and the inexperience of the users. Now, of course, in time, if we adopt this, that will disappear because we'll all become familiar with it and it won't be an issue for us. But in the initial stages, that will be a bit of an issue. A big issue is who the parties are in terms of how far down you go. If you go down and just take in your main subcontractors, and I can see the benefit of that for the client, because how far does he want to be involved in administrating the supply chain right down? On large scale contracts where the employer is particularly concerned about payment practices, they are going to look down the supply chain. As Steve said, even though the T3 subcontractors aren't part of the project bank account, they do have a fair payment charter and they do stick their nose in and see what's going on downstream. That will not happen, I suggest, in Ireland on a £5 million scheme, because the employers don't do it. And they don't do it now, so why are they going to do it if there's something called a project bank account kicking about? And if we don't push it down, I don't think we're getting the right benefit out. In terms of the advantages, we have security. These are the advantages I see. Security of payment. Well, in the public sector, we're not generally worried about security of payment from the employer. Perhaps maybe 5 years ago in Ireland we were a bit more concerned about that. We're okay now, I think. If we're working for a public sector client, we're going to get paid as a main contractor. In terms of the main subcontractor, then yes, he has got a bit of a protection here against main contractor insolvency. And that's a big issue and a big advantage, I think. If the trust deed is in place and it is correctly drafted, the trust deed, because there's an issue as well about maybe giving a preferential creditor situation arising if the main contractor becomes insolvent. Because why is this creditor, T1 subcontractor, who's entered into the project bank account, it doesn't really give him preferential creditor status, perhaps unless it's properly drafted. And I don't think that's been tested in the court yet. I might be wrong, but I don't think the insolvency situation has been tested where some of the other creditors say that actually these guys were given preferential status, preferential creditors, which you can't do in an insolvency situation. I don't think it's been tested, but it might be okay. And that would be a real advantage. So your T1 subcontractors are protected against main contractor insolvency. In terms of the private sector, where we are concerned about the employer having funds to pay us, they're not going to do that. No private sector developer is going to set up a project bank account, as I see it anyway. I don't see any reason why they would want to. Speed of payment, yes, that's an advantage. But as I said, we can do that under the contract without the requirement for a project bank account. So I don't see that as being such a big advantage. In terms of cost savings, I've seen no evidence that actually these savings are being delivered. OGC suggested there would be a 2.5% saving by having project bank accounts, i.e. the tenders they would receive would be 2.5% lower because they were putting this in place. But I've actually seen no evidence that that's true, and I've seen no evidence that it is coming out. And I take the point to, well, what evidence can I be given? It's very hard to. But I'm not sure that that's actually being delivered as a cost saving as much as possible. In terms of disadvantages, the setup cost, well, it's the lack of knowledge we have. And so I would say, perhaps, that if we are thinking of doing them in Ireland, we let the process run a little bit longer in UK and in the North, and let them make the mistakes and learn and find out how it operates, and then we'll adopt it. Particularly if we're going to adopt it for lower value contracts. As I say, if we're going to do something that's over half a billion euros, then fine. We can afford to invest in this and get the scheme right, and everyone will come up to speed, and it will be good. But if we're going to ask, typical QS, architect, engineers, and clients in Ireland to operate these €5 million schemes, I think we're asking for trouble unless we have very clear guidelines and template documents for them to use and make it easy for them. And that's not what I'm saying at the minute. But I take this going to be a pilot scheme, and if there's going to be a pilot scheme, then we'll learn from that, and we'll see what happens. But be careful, for small value stuff, are we really going to get the benefit out of it for the cost? Big thing to highlight is payment disputes still remain. It's not going to resolve disputes. We're still going to have disputes. And it has to be very careful how we draft the contract provisions to deal with the situation where the main contractor say, well, my subcontractor did £10 million of work last month, but I'm taking £2 million off him for another reason, so I'm only paying him 8. Now, what does the client do in that situation? Does he involve himself in that situation? Does he look at it? Does he not look at it? And if he's not going to look at it, then in a way are we defeating the purpose? I'm not sure. But I'm only highlighting the fact that payment disputes and disputes will still remain. Project bank accounts won't remove that. At the minute, I don't think we have standardised project bank accounts from documentation. And that goes back to the point I made maybe earlier, that if we are going to do this, then let's ask the Capital Works Management Framework, and I'm sure we'll be delighted to produce a template document that nobody's allowed to touch or amend. And we can use that as long as it's right, then that would be useful. But my biggest concern at the minute is the industry inexperience, if we're talking about using this for low value stuff. That would be my biggest concern. So, hate to be a doomsayer as such, but it's also maybe good to bring balance to these things. As I say, our view is that on high value contracts, whenever you're talking about things over half a million, so half a billion, 500 million, then one can easily see the benefits. And whatever cost is incurred in terms of administration, training, experience, and having to put thoughts into the trust deed and how it's going to operate, one can easily see how that cost is offset by the benefit. And it's not too hard to imagine that. And also whenever you're looking at your T1, even if you go to T2, some of those T2 contracts would be over 5-10 million. So they're still high value stuff. Our concern is that cost benefit doesn't work whenever you're dealing with the smaller value stuff. My also concern is it won't make everybody love each other. A little bit like the NEC contract. In the UK, we were used to working on the ICE contract, the 5th edition or 6th edition, which we had here as the IEI 3rd edition. And our JCT contract. Here we have the RAA, our GDLA. And then in the UK, we had the NEC. And we were told the problem why the construction industry keeps falling out is the adversarial nature of the contracts. And if we have the NEC, it's a big love-in and we won't have problems. And we have the NEC in Northern Ireland, unlike the rest of the UK, in Northern Ireland, every single contract, capital works contract, that is funded by public money has to use the NEC. So whether it's £200,000 building extension to a school, everything has to be the NEC. And it doesn't resolve all the disputes and it doesn't take it all away. And we can't, so as I say, the NEC didn't solve all the disputes in the construction industry. Project bank accounts will guide. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Edward. And really the whole basis of this is to get all the different perspectives. So we've had two. And now we're going to have Gillian Murtagh. Gillian is a director of Shea Murtagh. I think now a very well-known family firm based down in Rahani in County Westmeath. I think you could easily say that their success has been quite spectacular over the last number of years when the rest of the construction industry were suffering and going down. Murtagh have been growing and growing. Anytime I attend an As Ireland event, Shea Murtagh is normally mentioned as being the sort of exemplar company that have, the innovation and the efficiency and so on. And Murtaghs are major suppliers to the aforementioned Crossrail system. So Gillian has some experience of how project bank accounts operate for her, and probably lots of experience as to how the absence of project accounts have operated for her in the past as well. So we're delighted that you're here, Gillian. Gillian is also a member of our executive body, and she's a neighbour of both Niall Horn and Michael O'Leary, so she comes in very so we're delighted that you're here.
And various patches too, so it's all in the same building. Thank you very much. And Eddie, I'd like to say I'm all welcome for a love-in with anything as regards employers and contractors. For those of you who don't know me or my company, I'm Gillian Merkla, I'm Director of Shea Merkla Limited. We're over 40 years in business and we're a leading manufacturer and installer of pre-pressed products right throughout Ireland and the UK. Over the last number of years, with the changes in availability of work in Ireland, we went about and sought getting new markets. So in 2006, we set a strategy towards the UK to supply bridge beams, culverts, retaining walls and bespoke products to mainly infrastructure projects of rail, road and some utilities as well. Difficult to do, but we actually created the market from basically nothing. While we had done some work previously, it wasn't really until 2006-2007 before the market became available to us. One of the ones that we targeted in 2011 was the Crossrail project, and I'm not going to, because Steve has greatly taken a load of information and put it up, so it reduces my time. But we signed a contract for the C310 section in September 2011. So the C310 basically is the construction of 2 tunnels, approximately 5.5 kilometres in length under the River Thames, Plumstead to North Woolwich. So for us, what we're doing is we're actually supplying the precast concrete tunnel segments from our factory in Raharney. So we had to go about tendering for it, and for us, a project bank account didn't mean anything to us going into it. When we hit the UK market, for us, the procurement practices were completely different, payment practices were completely different, and it's been a growing and learning experience. Project bank accounts for us, it was our first time even knowing about it, and we really didn't get to grips with it until really the negotiation stage of the final part of the contract. But to give you an idea, like this is equivalent to 3,400 articulated loads of concrete going from Westmeath to Mullingar. So it's quite a large amount of product moving. Under the project bank account, we had to agree a schedule of payments during the contract negotiations, and this is where it all came to light for us. Our contract was set up in timelines for a planned setup, because this is bespoke. On most tunnels being done throughout the world, a lot of the time they would set up a tunnel-specific manufacturing facility close to where the tunnel is actually being built. So for us, again, it was a unique experience that we're actually manufacturing in Mullingar and shipping to the middle of London. And obviously then our production, because we were going to be producing all of it there, we actually had to do a bit of vesting as part of the contract, because they only have a certain amount of stock facility in London. So we would hold a certain amount in our plant in Raharney and then deliver it as required. And then additional requirements are, I like the new modern terminology called compensation events. So if there's slightly something different where they needed, say, extra segments than what we were actually tendered to actually supply in per day, etc. But in fairness, they're all correct. The timetable is set in line with a fair payment charter. A project bank account just doesn't work on its own. It has to be a fair payment charter, and that's what we got with Crossrail. In general, for a subcontractor or a T2 subcontractor like what we are, how it works is very, very simple and very much down to what you would do on a normal contract here. A submission of payment application is made by a determined date, and it's all date specific in what we do, along with all the supporting documentation. After about 2 weeks, you get a payment cert notifying you of how much you're going to be paid. So for us, it was very much, this was a new thing. We actually knew how much was actually going to be coming into us. But if there is, if on it that there is a discrepancy, or if there is actually a change to that, they will actually issue a PLS notice with that payment cert, so you know why that discrepancy is there. And also the fact that if there is a compensation event as well, that'll all be detailed there. Discrepancies for us, we have found that we had a few because we had travel going on where it would take 2 days or 3 days before actually a shipment would go from Raharney, by the time the travel time, such between A and B, there was, and it took us a while to actually get that one sorted out. But in general, the discrepancies were usually resolved by the next payment application and were applied then in payment. And then payment was received into our bank account as dictated by the payment calendar. That was part of our contract agreement. And it is as simple as that for what we have gone through on the Crossrail project. I just put up, again, it's simple really, but for us, what we had to do is on our project documentation, what we actually had to submit to them for a payment was we had to give a cumulative application and a period application. Along with that, then any other details, like for us, like would be delivery dockets. So every single truck that went actually out and delivered will have delivery docket, and a signed delivery note would be put as part of it as well. This is our Bible though. This is what we go with, which is our C310 payment calendar. So as you can see by the payment calendar, it gives us our date as to when we actually have to have our details in. Then by the end, you can see right across the top, payment to subcontractors and suppliers. So if you look down across, so for say, take this 9th to the 11th, payment 34, you can see that we have to have in our valuation by the 9th to the 11th, and then hopefully next week I get payment coming through on the 9th to the 12th. For us, that's a whole new detail that we would never have seen. In truth, while we say the 9th comes in, it's 30 days. You can see the calendar going right across the top. But for us, we find that we actually are getting payment usually closer to about 28 days. And that has created a whole new idea of what payment should be like through the actual construction chain. So in conclusion, while I do agree with Eddie, and in fairness, that project bank accounts don't actually cure everything, and I do think there has to be a certain amount of reality that we have to change procurement practices along with payment practices in Ireland. And I just kind of wrote a note to myself on the way up, and I was like kind of going, so if I personalise it down and into our company, have we had to chase money in the last 12 months? The answer is yes. Has it been owed over 120 days? The answer is yes. Was there issues on our aspect of the project? The answer is no. And was it a government contract? And the answer is yes. So while I do believe there should be changes, as I say, project bank accounts mightn't necessarily be the only change, maybe a fair payment charter, something to that effect. But I do think we need to look at new ways of moving through the supply chain, and a transparency of expenditure that means that to somewhat your contract is safe. And in conclusion, just I've lifted a piece that from the government publications in the UK, which says, this move is set to revolutionise the way the construction supply chain gets paid in an industry which around 99% of businesses are SMEs. Historically, it has not been unusual for lower tier supply chain members to have to wait up to 100 days to receive payment, which damages their cash flow, can harm their business. Supply chain members in PBA projects will no longer have to wait for higher tier contractors to process their payment. Instead, they will receive it directly through a project account specific to the project they are working on. Thank you.
Thanks, Gillian. I think you're the first to get a round of applause.
They're not at the door either, so.
And I don't see any more employees down there, so thank you, and very well done. Our final speaker, and we will have questions and answer session immediately after this. Final speaker is Pat Lucy. Pat is the director of CIF, he's the head of their civils, and I think the vice chairman of our civil engineering contract.
So I keep getting reminded.
Big contributor to policy and so on within the CIF for a long time. So you have experience, Pat, as well. CIF was probably our biggest, and most people would say one of our best contractors down the years. You have experience of London and Crossrail as well, and you have experience of project bank accounts. And you might have some of the concerns that they might bring for the company as well. So we're delighted to hear what you have to say to us.
Thank you. Good morning. It's great to be here, not necessarily to talk about project bank accounts, but it's lovely to see people in the industry coming together to talk about something that could improve, better what we're doing. I think we should have more of it. I think we should be concentrating on things wider than project bank accounts. They're one small part of a big picture, and that big picture needs fixing. And the one thing that we see as we travel out of this country is that the contractors that come from countries where their industry is nurtured are travelling very successfully, and the gain is going back to their home country in terms of supply chain engagement and so on. Now I'm going to continue the Crossrail theme here today, because the contract that we're running at the moment with a project bank account is the Crossrail project. It's contract C305, it's Eastern Running Tunnels. It's between Putting the Lane and the Victoria Dock Portals and Farringdon Station. It's a joint venture, Drogheda Cis joint venture. We're the smaller part of this joint venture, and the conditions of contract are the Crossrail main civil contract, target contract with activity schedule, which is an amended NEC3 option C contract. The extent of the works for us is from our main base is the limo shaft, which is just there. So we're doing this drive across here, and we are also going from Putting the Lane here, and we're going from limo as well to the Victoria Dock Portal. In total, it's almost 12 kilometres of twin bore tunnel. And then, just to show you maybe where, give you a feel for it, the limo site that I mentioned is this area here. So that's the site. This is Canningstown Station here, and the TBM has gone in this direction over towards Canary Wharf. The photograph up here is of the segment build area. These segments are not provided by Shea Martins, unfortunately, Gillian. And Edward, we made these segments as the main contractor in the segment factory which we set up. And the gentlemen who are working in the segment area are supplied by a specialist mining labour force supplier, but we are doing the tunnelling ourselves as the main contractor. This picture here is of the Stepney Green shaft, and you can see all the different levels. At the far end, that's the TBM after breaking through a couple of weeks ago, and through this station, the TBM has to transit, and it's done that. The first one, the eastbound one, has gone through this station, and it's mining again. And on that one, the temporary works were designed by our chief engineer in the making, a young man who's working on the project, aided by our chief engineer in our Dublin office, and the fabrication was done by a fabricator in County Carlow. He came in the most economical of the whole lot for the temporary works gone in there. The project is not just about tunnelling, there's a huge amount of aspects to it. This is something that we didn't expect to have to do. The utility work should have been done before the contract started, but they weren't complete. So under the contract, this was brought into us as a compensation event, and in total it will probably end up being about £20 million of additional work. This work, interestingly enough, is on a cost reimbursable basis. So even though we are on an option C target cost, when this compensation event came into our contract, it's awarded to the subcontractors on an option E, which is cost reimbursable. Now that means that we have to verify all the costs that are coming from the subcontractor, but the reason that was done is because when it comes to this kind of work in London, nobody can tell in advance the extent of what you have to do, and for anyone to try and price that is very, very difficult. On the contract conditions, it's a client design scheme, and at the start of this project we had an optimised contractor involvement process, which I have a feeling you had something to do with, Steve, which is a period of time where the contractor could input into the design and suggest value engineering adjustments. Some of those were adopted and some of them weren't. The contract includes a change in law provision. There's an ultimate parent company guarantee, and it's a 10% performance bond that's required. The Z6 is the use of the project bank account. Collateral warranties go to third parties, London Underground, DLR, and some of the oversight developers. The LADs are against some key dates, and they vary between £51,000 per day to £192,000 per day. and the defects date is the completion date plus 52 weeks. On the target cost, there's a pay and gain mechanism. The tender price sets the target cost, the tender total of the prices. The target cost gets adjusted by compensation events. We're paid actual cost on an open book basis plus a tendered fee. The open book basis and the project bank account align very well together. The pay and gain share adjusts the payments to us through comparison with the actual cost. So there's a little diagram here, and we're being optimistic, we're showing a gain share. The ratio on this is 50-50 on this contract, but if we ended up spending more than the revised target price, we end up paying for half of it, and the client pays for the other half. So it's in everyone's interest to try and get that under and both sides win. That's the background of the contract. In relation to the project bank account itself, it comes under the contract clause Z6. And the project bank account, these are extracts from the document. So it's an account in the name of the employer used for the sole purpose of receiving payments from the employer and making payments to the contractor and subcontractors and all other payments of defined cost. Now it uses the term subcontractor, so I've just included below the definition of a subcontractor from the main contract, and you'll see that it covers suppliers. So it's covering the supply chain. The employer establishes the project bank account with the project bank within 3 weeks of the contract date. And unless stated otherwise, the employer pays the charges and the employer receives any interest that comes from that account. On or before each assessment date, we submit to the project manager an application for payment. And we show on the application all the amounts of defined costs, including the amounts due to the subcontractors in accordance with their contracts. Before the final date for payment, the employer makes payment to the project bank account of the amount which is due to be paid. And the contractor, now this is an interesting one, the contractor makes payment to the project bank account of any amount not paid by the employer and required to make payment in full of all amounts of defined cost, including amounts due to subcontractors. The project bank account does not have an overdraft facility. If there is a payment due to a subcontractor and there's not enough money in the project bank account, the main contractor has got to put the money in. Automatically, anyone here who's working on the new government contract would be shaking with the prospect of that. The contractor prepares an authorisation setting out, in respect of the certified payments, all amounts of defined cost, including amounts due to the subcontractors, as assessed by the contractor, and the sums due to the contractor. So after we sign the authorisation, we submit it to the project bank. We arrange the payments from the project bank at the sum set out of the authorisation, and as Gillian says, it does work very quickly and it does work to a very specific timetable. There was mention of a trust deed, and the trust deed is an agreement between the employer and the contractor, and it contains the provisions for administering the project bank account. It's a 5 or 6 page document, and it just sets out in very simple terms how it works. The employer and the contractor signed the trust deeds before the first assessment date. So, in summary, there is no negative feedback from any of our commercial team on the operation of the project bank account. I spoke with our commercial manager the other day, who had worked on a series of projects before Crossrail with other project bank account arrangements, and he says the Crossrail one is one of the better ones. It is a large contract. It does tick the boxes. It is greater than 500 million. So it ticks every box that would justify the use of a project bank account. In terms of the bigger picture and what's going on in Ireland, I don't think it would be appropriate for what we've got going on here at the moment, but that's the bigger picture. I think the project bank accounts and the other things that are going on should all be solved together. So, thank you.